Sit down. Miss Granger, since the rest of these faces seem to have abandoned every thought the moment they departed my dungeon, perhaps you would remind us where our last lesson concluded. Do try to be precise. The others, it appears, remember nothing at all.
We were studying the shrinking solution, Professor. We had reached the point where the chopped daisy roots and the sliced caterpillars are added, and you explained that the precise order of ingredients determines whether the potion turns the correct shade of green or fails completely.
Correct. Naturally. It is a rare comfort to know that at least one mind in this room retains information beyond a single week. Today we abandon the shrinking solution. We move to something considerably less forgiving. The draught of peace, a potion that soothes anxiety and calms agitation. The draught of peace demands patience, a quality I do not expect all of you to possess. Add too much hellebore and the drinker sinks into a sleep so heavy it resembles death. Potter, I would advise you to listen. Fame will not stir your cauldron for you. Now, powdered moonstone and syrup of hellebore both feature in this draught. Can anyone tell me why we add the moonstone before heating the mixture? Anyone at all besides Miss Granger, whose hand is, as ever, already stretched toward the ceiling? No one. Very well, Miss Granger.
Because moonstone dissolves fully only in a cool mixture, Professor. If it is added after the flame, the powder clumps and refuses to bind with the hellebore, and the entire draught loses its calming property, becoming at best a bitter and entirely useless grey liquid.
5 points to Gryffindor. Restrain your excitement. The draught of peace was once considered so difficult that the Ministry restricted its brewing to qualified portioneers alone. You, of course, are not qualified. You are children with knives and open flame, which is precisely why I shall be watching every cauldron. I recall a student many years ago, before most of you were born, who assured me he required no supervision whatsoever. He added his unicorn horn before his moonstone, reversed the sequence entirely, and produced black smoke that emptied this dungeon in seconds. He never returned to my subject. Open your kits. You will find powdered moonstone in the 3rd vial, and syrup of hellebore in the 4th. Weasley. Yes, you do not touch the hellebore until I have finished speaking. I have watched you handle a simple stirring rod as though it were a living serpent. The measurements here are not suggestions. 7 drops of hellebore, no more. A single drop in excess and the drinker's calm becomes a stupor from which he may never wake. This is not a potion for the careless, the distracted, or the hopelessly overconfident. Malfoy, that includes you. The draught of peace was famously brewed by Damocles Belby, the same wizard who later invented the Wolfsbane potion, a brilliant man, precise, patient, everything that this classroom is not. He understood that a calming draught and a poison are separated only by the steadiness of one's hand. Stir counterclockwise, precisely 7 times, then wait. You will notice the vapor turns from grey to a soft silver. That is the sign the moonstone has fully dissolved. If your vapor remains grey, you have failed already, and I would advise you not to inhale it too deeply. Potter. Speaking of Wolfsbane, I once brewed that particular potion for a colleague. Delicate work. Month after month, precise to the drop. And do you know the gratitude I received? None whatsoever. Some people take great skill entirely for granted. Continue stirring. I am merely reflecting. Now, while your draughts settle, observe the color. A true draught of peace produces a faint silvery steam that rises in slow spirals. Long bottoms I see as emitting something closer to the smoke of a small house fire. Move away from it, boy, before you sedate the entire row. Patience. That is the entire lesson. The ingredients are simple, the discipline is not. I have known grown wizards, trained, decorated, celebrated, who could not brew this draught without lapsing into an accidental sleep. So I do not expect miracles from a room that cannot remember to bring a quill. Add your powdered porcupine quills now. Carefully, Weasley, the whole quantity, not half onto the floor. This ingredient thickens the draught and binds the calm into something lasting. Rush it, and the peace it grants lasts mere seconds before the anxiety returns twofold. Rather like a holiday that ends too soon. There was a witch, Glenda Chittock, some of you may know her voice from the wireless, who once requested a vial of this very draft before a broadcast. Terrible nerves, apparently. She drank it, calmed beautifully, then fell asleep live on air for 11 minutes. Measure carefully. Watch the surface of your draft. When brewed correctly, it becomes perfectly still. No bubbling, no movement, a flawless mirror. That stillness is the mark of a mind at peace, captured in liquid. Finnegan, if yours is bubbling, you have overheated it. Again, I am beginning to sense a pattern with you. Reduce your flames to the lowest possible setting. The draught of peace must simmer gently, never boil. Impatience destroys this potion faster than any wrong ingredient could. I have watched students of genuine talent ruin a perfect draft in the final minute simply because they could not bear to wait quietly. Hellebore is a curious plant, beautiful, deadly. It flowers in the dead of winter, when everything else has surrendered to the frost. There is a lesson buried in that, though I doubt this room is equipped to appreciate it. The most dangerous things often wear the most serene faces. Once the hellebore is added, the draught will hiss softly and darken. Do not panic, this reaction is entirely expected. Weasley, that expression of pure terror is unnecessary. The color will settle to a pale turquoise within a minute, if you have measured correctly. If it settles to muddy brown, you have failed. I am reminded of a former colleague, a defense teacher as it happens, though we rarely keep them longer than a single year, who insisted that potion making was, and I quote him exactly, mere cookery. I invited him to brew this draught. He dissolved the cauldron entirely. Stir once more, clockwise this time, a single rotation. This reverses the direction and locks the ingredients into their balance. It is the most delicate moment of the entire process. One rotation too many and the potion curdles. One too few and it never sets. There is no room for approximation. Now we wait. Yes, actual waiting. I am well aware this concept is foreign to a generation that expects everything delivered instantly by owl. The draft requires 7 full minutes to stabilize. Use the time to clean your stations, not to whisper. Thomas, I can hear you from here. While we wait, a word on the origin of this draft. It appears in potioneering texts as early as the 15th century, when a healer named Gunhilda of Gorsmore used it to calm patients suffering severe distress. She was, by every account, a woman of extraordinary patience. She would have loathed this class. Observe how the steam behaves as the potion stabilizes. It should rise slowly, almost reluctantly, curling upward like silver ribbon. This is the visual signature of a correct draught of peace. Potter, I notice yours produces a great deal of steam very quickly. That is not enthusiasm. That is a warning. There is a common misconception, encouraged by careless writers, that this draught simply makes one happy. It does no such thing. It removes agitation. It quiets the storm within. Happiness is not something any potion can grant, and any peddler who claims otherwise is selling you a love potion in disguise. Speaking of love potions, I am obliged each and every year to confiscate a truly astonishing quantity of Amatentia around a certain February holiday. Every year, without fail, some hopeful child believes a stolen potion will win them affection. It will not. It manufactures obsession, never love. The two differ. Check your drafts now. The color should be a clear, pale turquoise, the precise shade of shallow water over pale sand. If yours matches, you have, against considerable odds, succeeded. If yours resembles standing pond water, you have not, and I would ask you to reflect on which instructions you ignored. Do not, and I cannot stress this point sufficiently, do not taste the draft to check it. I say this every single year, and every year one student decides the rule does not apply to them. A correctly brewed draught of peace will render you unconscious for the entire afternoon. Now add the final ingredient, a single sprig of dried valerian laid gently upon the surface. Do not stir it in. It dissolves on its own, releasing the last of the calming properties. Watch, the sprig will sink slowly, and as it does, the surface will grow perfectly still. I once knew a wizard who could brew this draught in his sleep. Quite literally, I suspect, given how little he seemed to care for anything at all. And yet his potions were flawless. It has always irritated me privately that raw talent so often lands upon those who value it least. Look at your cauldrons. Some of you, a surprising, almost troubling few, have produced a genuine draught of peace. The rest have produced something between a failed experiment and an active hazard. Longbottom, yours appears to be moving of its own accord, which I assure you it should not be doing. The value of this draught extends far beyond the calming of ordinary nerves. In its purest form, brewed by a true master, it has aided the recovery of witches and wizards who have suffered great trauma, those who have faced things the mind can scarcely hold. It deserves genuine respect. Consistency is what separates a potineer from a child playing at a cauldron. Anyone can produce a passable draught once, entirely by accident. A true master produces the identical result every single time, precisely without variation. That is the standard I hold. It is the standard you have yet to approach. I was once accused by a student not unlike several of you of being unreasonably strict about measurements. That same student later brewed a swelling solution instead of a deflating draught and spent a fortnight in the hospital wing, the approximate size of a small hippopotamus. I regret nothing. Begin bottling your draughts now, carefully into the labeled vials, not the wide flasks. Fill each vial to the marked line, cork it firmly, and write your name upon it in legible script. If I cannot read your name, I shall assume the potion is unclaimed and mark it accordingly. I want a full sample from each of you upon my desk before you leave this dungeon. I shall be testing them, not by tasting, obviously, I am not a fool, but by measuring their stability over the coming days. A true draught of peace holds its stillness for a week. I am aware that some of you consider this subject beneath your grand ambitions. You dream of dueling, of defense, of glory in some imagined battle. Let me assure you, the wizard who brews steadily under pressure will outlast the one who merely waves a wand impressively. Remember that always. For those whose drafts failed entirely, and I count at least 6 cauldrons of outright disaster from where I currently stand, there is no shame in failure itself. The shame lies in failing to understand why. I expect each of you to identify your error before our next lesson together. Your homework. 12 inches of parchment on the properties of hellebore and its role in calming draughts, why it soothes in small measure yet kills in large. I want reputable sources, not idle speculation. I want precision, not padding. And I want it written entirely in your own words, Malfoy. 12 inches, not 11, which I shall certainly notice, and not 20, which merely tells me you cannot express a single idea concisely. The witches and wizards who came before you managed profundity in one sentence. I am not asking for brilliance. I am asking for accuracy and effort. Consider, for a moment, the wider purpose of what we do here. Potions is not the flashiest of the magical arts, and I am aware it wins none of you admirers in the corridors, but it is the quiet discipline behind every healer, every aura, every survivor. It is foundational work. There exists a text, Golpalot's third law, that governs the brewing of antidotes, a topic we shall approach later in the year. It states, in essence, that the antidote to a blended poison is more than the mere sum of its parts. Remember the name. You will encounter it again. I recall attending a potioneers' gathering some years ago where a self-important man declared loudly that the draught of peace was a beginner's exercise. I asked him to demonstrate. His hand shook, he overmeasured the hellebore, and he put himself to sleep in front of the entire hall. The lesson there, should any of you manage to absorb it, is that arrogance is the potioneer's deadliest ingredient. It clouds the judgment. It steadies nothing. I have seen prodigiously gifted students undone entirely by the conviction that the rules were written for lesser minds. The rules were written for everyone. Now, those of you still laboring over unfinished drafts, do not rush the final minutes. A potion abandoned early is worse than a potion never begun, for it looks complete and deceives the drinker. Weasley, I said, do not rush it. That vigorous stirring will not accelerate anything but your own failure. I once received a letter, I shall not name the sender, complaining that my standards had reduced a promising young wizard to tears. The promising young wizard in question had attempted to brew a sleeping draught by guesswork and set fire to his own eyebrows. Tears seemed a proportionate response. Understand this clearly. When I correct you sharply, I am not being cruel for the pleasure of it, whatever you may whisper in the corridors. I am preventing the moment years from now when a careless measurement costs someone their life. Precision is not cruelty. It is a mercy you do not yet comprehend. There is a reason the great potioneers are remembered for their patience, rather than their flair. Consider Hesper Starkey, who studied the phases of the moon for decades to perfect her timings. Tedious work, unglamorous work, and yet her methods underpin half the recipes in your textbooks. Glamour fades, rigor endures. Those who have finished, cap your vials and remain seated. Do not, I beg you, wander the dungeon comparing your work like proud parents. A finished draft is not a triumph. It is the minimum I required of you. Save yourself congratulation for something that actually merits it. Longbottom, sit down. I want to draw your attention briefly to the smell of a correctly brewed draft. It should be faint, almost absent, clean like still water. A strong or sweet odor means you have erred. The draught of peace announces itself through silence, not perfume. So too, one hopes, do the wisest people. A former pupil of mine, genuinely talented, one of the very few, once brewed a draught of peace so flawless I kept the vial for 3 years merely to study it. He never once bragged of it. That, more than the potion itself, is why I remember him. Consider the alternative careers awaiting those who master this art. Stent Mungo's does not hire wand wavers. It hires potioneers who can measure hellebore at midnight without a tremor. The Aura Office relies on antidotes brewed by steady hands. Even the Ministry's finest owe their survival, quietly, to people who do this work well. I notice a few of you glancing at the clock. The clock will not release you 1 moment sooner for being watched. We finish when the work is finished, and not before. This is not a subject one may abandon halfway. A half-brewed potion is often more dangerous than none. Let me address the matter of failure directly, since so many of you are presently acquainted with it. A ruined draft is not the end of your education. It is data. It tells you precisely where your discipline lapsed. The student who studies their failure learns twice what the accidental success ever teaches. I confess a certain weariness at repeating these principles year after year to faces that so rarely retain them, and yet occasionally, rarely, a student surprises me, 1 in 100, perhaps fewer. That single student is the reason I continue to stand in this cold dungeon at all. Now examine your neighbour's draft, not to gloat, Malfoy, but to learn. Notice how the successful ones share a particular stillness, a particular clarity. Notice how the failures each fail differently. There is more to be learned from a dozen mistakes than from a single lonely lucky success. Observe carefully. I shall tell you something that appears in no textbook. The draft of peace cannot be forced. You cannot bully it into completion, cannot intimidate the hellebore into cooperating. It yields only to a calm and deliberate hand. In that sense, brewing it well requires the very quality it grants. There is an irony there that the more thoughtful among you may appreciate. The agitated student brews an agitated draft. The rushed hand produces a rushed, useless liquid. The potion in its way is a mirror. It reflects the temperament of its maker with an honesty that most people find deeply uncomfortable. I once watched a colleague, brilliant, celebrated, insufferably pleased with himself, attempt this draught in a foul temper after some petty dispute. The result curdled within seconds. He blamed the moonstone, he blamed the cauldron, he blamed, eventually, the weather. He never once blamed his own foul mood. So when I demand calm in this dungeon, understand it is not merely for my comfort, though that is a welcome consequence. It is a professional necessity. A loud, chaotic brewing room produces loud, chaotic potions. Silence is not a punishment here. Silence is a tool. Learn to wield it deliberately. Let us speak of storage. Since a potion poorly kept is a potion wasted, the draught of peace must be sealed from light and kept cool. Exposed to sunlight, it degrades within days, losing first its stillness, then its potency. Treat the finished work with the same care you gave the brewing. A vial improperly corked will separate, the moonstone settling, the hellebore rising, the whole delicate balance undone. I have opened supposedly finished draughts to find 2 useless layers where there should have been 1. Weasley, cork it firmly. I would rather not test whether your handiwork survives the walk to my desk. There is a persistent rumor, spread chiefly by those who have never brewed one, that the draught of peace is addictive. It is not. It calms. It does not compel. Confusing the two is the error of the lazy mind, and I expect none of you to repeat such nonsense in my hearing. That said, and mark this carefully, no potion should be relied upon in place of genuine steadiness of character. A draught can quiet a single storm. It cannot build the ship. The wizard who reaches for a vial at every difficulty has learned to sedate his problems, not to solve them. I have, in my time, watched perfectly capable people grow dependent on shortcuts, magical and otherwise. It rarely ends well. The draught of peace is a fine tool in a crisis and a poor foundation for a life. Use it as the former, never mistake it for the latter. That distinction matters. Now, for those of you already contemplating next lessons, we shall move from calming draughts to their opposite, the study of antidotes. It is more demanding still. If the draught of peace has humbled you, I recommend a summer of quiet reflection before we begin. Gulpalot's work spares no one. Antidotes require you to identify a poison before you can counter it, to reason backward from effect to cause, under pressure, correctly the first time. There are no second attempts when someone has been poisoned. This is the point at which potions ceases to be an exercise and becomes quite literally life or death. I mention this not to frighten you, though a little fear would suit several of you well. I mention it so you understand the stakes of the discipline you have been treating so casually. The steadiness you fail to build here is the steadiness you will lack when it matters most. I was once called at a most inconvenient hour to counter a poisoning at this very school. I shall spare you the details, but I will tell you that the antidote I brewed that night depended entirely on habits formed in classrooms exactly like this one. Habits you are currently refusing to build. So the next time you consider my standards excessive, recall that. Every tedious measurement, every repeated instruction, every point I deduct, it is all rehearsal for a moment I hope none of you ever face, but for which I am determined you will nonetheless be prepared. That is the whole of it. Let us return briefly to the ingredients themselves, for I suspect several of you treated them as interchangeable. They are not. Moonstone harvested under a waning moon behaves differently from moonstone gathered under a full one. The finest potioneers know their ingredients by origin, not merely by name. Sloppiness begins in ignorance. I once purchased hellebore from a supplier who assured me it was the finest in Britain. It was, in fact, the dried remains of an entirely unrelated plant, sold at a considerable markup to a man he assumed knew nothing. He was mistaken about that, as suppliers of his sort tend to be. The point, Weasley, since you appear lost, verify your sources. A potion is only as trustworthy as its weakest ingredient. I have known accomplished brewers undone entirely by a single adulterated component they never thought to question. Trust in this discipline is a luxury reserved for the reckless. Verify everything, assume nothing. There is a broader principle at work, one I shall state plainly, since subtlety is clearly wasted here. Every step in a potion depends upon the one before it. A flawless final stir cannot rescue a botched beginning. The draught of peace, like most worthwhile things, forgives nothing done carelessly at the start. Consider how many of you rushed the moonstone in your eagerness to reach the dramatic hellebore. Now consider how many of your drafts curdled. The correlation, I assure you, is not coincidental. Patience at the outset is repaid at the end. Impatience at the outset is punished at the end, invariably. I have taught this lesson to a great many cohorts, and each year I harbor the faint hope that this particular truth will finally take root. It rarely does. Youth is convinced it can skip the tedious foundations and arrive at mastery directly. Youth is, in this as in most things, mistaken. Let us discuss temperature control, since I observed at least 4 of you cook your drafts as though searing a steak. Heat is not a matter of speed. A gentle, sustained warmth extracts the calming properties slowly and completely. Fierce heat extracts nothing but ruin and a faint smell of burnt hair. The old masters brewed over enchanted coals, precisely calibrated to hold a single temperature for hours. You have a flame and a dial, which is more than they possessed, and still most of you cannot manage it. Longbottom, I saw your flame leap a foot into the air. That is not brewing, that is arson. A wand maker of my acquaintance once told me that the difference between a fine wand and a poor one lies entirely in patience during the crafting. Same is true here. The magic is not in the ingredients alone, it is in the unhurried attention paid to each of them in turn. I want you to think, as you finish, about what this draft demands of its maker. Stillness, attention, humility before the process. These are not weaknesses. They are the disciplines that separate a genuine practitioner from a child who once got lucky. Cultivate them here, or fail everywhere they are required. Some of you will never brew another draught of peace after your examinations, and that is your right. But the habits you build over this cauldron, the precision, the patience, the refusal to guess, will serve you whatever path you take, or their absence will haunt you. The choice, as ever, is yours. I notice Malfoy wearing the expression of a young man who believes his family name will excuse a mediocre draft. It will not. This cauldron does not know your surname, Mr. Malfoy. It does not care who your father is. It responds only to competence, a currency in which not all inheritances are rich. That applies to every one of you, whatever your name or your ambitions. A potion is the most honest judge you will ever face. It cannot be charmed, flattered, or bribed. It reflects with perfect indifference exactly how much care you brought to it. Most of yours today reflect very little indeed. Before I release you, one final observation on the draft's history. During times of great fear and conflict, demand for the draught of peace has always risen sharply. Healers brewed it by the barrel. It is a quiet reminder that this humble potion has steadied more frightened people than any spell ever comforted. So do not sneer at it as I saw 1 or 2 of you do at the lesson's start. There is nothing lowly about work that keeps a terrified person breathing steadily through a long night. That, Potter, is the sort of heroism that earns no medals and saves more lives than fame ever could. I have, on occasion, been asked why I teach this subject at all, given my evident opinion of most who study it. The answer is simple. Someone must ensure that the rare, capable student is not lost among the careless majority. For that one, the tedium of the rest is worthwhile. I recall a colleague once remarking, over a truly dreadful cup of tea, that I would be far happier teaching only the gifted. Perhaps, but the gifted rarely arrive already knowing they are gifted. They are found occasionally in classrooms exactly like this one, hiding among the disasters. So I look. That is enough sentiment for one afternoon. I fear it does not suit the dungeon air. Return your attention to your vials. A capped draught left too long near a flame will still degrade. so those of you who finished early would do well to move your samples away from the heat now. Cap your vials, those still unfinished, and I see you, Longbottom. Leave your cauldron precisely where it stands. I shall neutralize its contents myself before it neutralizes the corridor outside. Clear your stations thoroughly. Return your unused ingredients to the store cupboard, correctly labeled, Finnegan, in the correct jars, not wherever your hand happens to fall. Extinguish your flames, wipe down your surfaces. Leave your labeled samples upon my desk as you exit, in a single orderly row. Granger, 5 points for the only correct answer offered in the past hour. Do not let it go to your head. Potter, Weasley, endeavour before our next meeting to arrive with something faintly resembling preparation. I ask for very little. I receive somehow even less than that. Class dismissed. Go quietly. Do not slam the door on your way out. My patience, unlike this draft, does not restore itself overnight. And Longbottom, step away from that cauldron before you do to this dungeon what you very nearly did to it last term. Now, out. The syrup of hellebore comes next, and this, I warn you plainly, is where most of you will fail. Add it 1 single drop at a time. Count in your head if you must, though I suspect several of you will lose count somewhere around 3. Malfoy, attend to your cauldron.